Every year, without fail, the same words hit me like a cold slap across the face. There's no room for your kids. I had learned to brace myself, to swallow the sting of disappointment before it even fully landed. But this year, it cut deeper than ever. Standing in the doorway, my arms full of carefully wrapped gifts and a casserole I had spent hours perfecting, I felt my heart sink. Their eyes didn't flicker with guilt or even hesitation. It was as if my children's absence was a matter of simple fact, something that needed no justification. I forced a smile, trying to make light of the exclusion, but the words echoed in my mind, louder than any laugh or greeting that followed. I could feel the heat creeping up my neck, the tight knot of embarrassment forming in my chest, while my kids lingered behind me, unaware of the silent cruelty they were about to witness. Every hug exchanged among cousins, every cheerful toast from my relatives, only reminded me how visible our absence was. I wanted to vanish, to retreat to a corner and shield my children from the sting of being unwanted, but I forced myself to stay. I had to witness this, to endure it, to remind myself why I couldn't stay silent anymore. Even as my family laughed and celebrated together, the unspoken message was clear. My kids, and by extension, I, did not belong here. It was a ritual of rejection, performed with casual ease, and yet it ignited something within me. A flicker of anger, a swell of determination that refused to be extinguished by their arrogance. This wasn't just another holiday. It was a reminder that change had to come, that the days of quietly accepting their disregard were over. I took a deep breath, forcing my shoulders to straighten, because even though I felt small and invisible, I knew I couldn't let this moment define us. My kids deserved better, and I promised myself that one day they would see that we had a place, and it would be on our terms, not theirs. I couldn't help but drift back to all the other holidays, each one etched painfully in my memory. Every year, I bent over backward to accommodate my family's whims, rearranging my own plans, changing travel schedules, even skipping small personal joys just to fit into the space they deemed acceptable. I remember lugging bags, toys, and carefully prepared meals, only to be met with casual indifference or the pointed favoritism that always seemed to land on someone else. My children's laughter was often hushed, their excitement curtailed, because in the eyes of my relatives, they were always the ones who took up too much space. I had learned to hide my resentment, to mask the sting with polite smiles and nods, even as my chest tightened and my throat ached with unsaid words. There were dinners where my contributions were ignored, gifts exchanged without acknowledgement, and moments where I caught the subtle smirk or eye roll aimed at me when I dared to suggest something. I sacrificed comfort, pride, and sometimes even my own sense of joy to preserve the fragile illusion of family harmony, while silently tallying the injustices stacked against us. It was exhausting, watching favoritism play out in slow, relentless repetition, while I tried to shield my kids from the hurt that seemed to seep from every word and glance. Each holiday left me smaller, more cautious, and yet a quiet ember of defiance started to glow inside me, fueled by the repeated pain of being disregarded. I carried those memories into every interaction, a silent testament to the pattern of neglect, and an unspoken promise to myself that someday, somehow, that imbalance would be set right. As we drove home that night, I couldn't stop replaying every slight, every whispered judgment, every roll of the eyes my family thought I wouldn't notice. Why did they always undervalue me, my efforts, my children? Was it something I had done? Or had they simply decided that we didn't deserve a place at their table? The questions spun endlessly in my mind, twisting into anger, frustration, and a deep sense of injustice. I thought about all the times I had softened my voice, bent my plans, and swallowed my pride just to maintain peace, yet peace never came. Instead, there was always judgment, always exclusion, always the subtle but unmistakable message that we were unworthy. And yet, beneath the hurt, a different feeling started to emerge, a flicker of something I hadn't let myself feel in years. It was a spark of defiance, a quiet but insistent whisper that said I didn't have to accept this anymore. If they refused to value us, then perhaps it was time to take control in a way they could not ignore. The thought of turning their favoritism on its head, of showing them that we had worth they had long dismissed, made my chest tighten in a mix of excitement and determination. I began to imagine the ways I could assert myself, the subtle, clever maneuvers that would finally give my children, and myself, the recognition we deserved. That night, frustration morphed into planning, and planning into a silent promise. We would no longer be the forgotten ones. That year, the humiliation arrived sharper than ever. We had arrived early, hoping to quietly settle in, and as usual, I tried to make small talk, to appear invisible yet polite. But my cousin, with that condescending smirk I knew so well, announced loudly for everyone to hear, "We only have space for the kids of people who actually matter." The room froze for a heartbeat, then laughter rippled around me. My chest tightened and my stomach knotted. My kids' faces fell. Confusion and hurt mirrored in their eyes, and I felt the familiar, suffocating weight of exclusion pressing down on me. The ache wasn't just in being slighted. It was in the public degradation, the way my family made it clear we were outsiders in the place where we should have belonged. That night, as we drove home in silence, the anger inside me didn't fade. It swelled and twisted into something different, sharper, an ember that refused to die. I realized that enduring this pattern quietly, letting their favoritism dictate our presence, had only reinforced their control. Enough was enough. This year, nothing would be the same. I began imagining ways to assert our presence, ways to shift the narrative so that my children would not just be included, they would be celebrated. Ideas sparked like flares in my mind, a surprise, a statement, a space that was ours. The embarrassment, the hurt, the repeated dismissals. They had all built a foundation, a quiet strength that now demanded release. I vowed silently, but firmly, that we would take our place, not by begging or shrinking, but by showing them exactly what they had underestimated. The moment of power shifted in my chest, a promise to myself that this holiday would be the first where we reclaimed our dignity. Over the following weeks, I began to quietly orchestrate a plan that would ensure this holiday was unlike any before. I scoured venues, finally settling on a private hall that was elegant, spacious, and far beyond anything my family would have imagined I could access. Every detail mattered: the lighting, the tables, the subtle decorations that would feel celebratory without being gaudy. I sent discreet invitations to friends, neighbors, and colleagues who admired and respected me, people who would bring warmth and energy, making the contrast with my family's coldness undeniable. I also arranged small, thoughtful surprises for my children, custom gifts, handwritten notes, and little tokens that celebrated their uniqueness and achievements, things that would make them feel cherished and seen. Each plan was layered carefully, designed to create both emotional and social impact, a subtle reminder to my relatives that exclusion had consequences. I imagined the shock on their faces when they realized that while they had insisted my kids didn't belong, we had crafted a space overflowing with love, laughter, and admiration. The thought of watching them realize that their dismissal had only fueled something greater gave me a thrill I hadn't felt in years. All the while, I kept my preparations secret, slipping in and out of stores, making calls, and sketching ideas late into the night, careful not to hint at anything to my kids or anyone in my family. With each arrangement, my confidence grew, the ember of empowerment becoming a steady, burning flame. By the time the holiday arrived, I wasn't just prepared. I was unstoppable, ready to show my family that space isn't given. It's created, earned, and celebrated. I knew that to make our presence unforgettable, I had to understand my family better than they understood me. Over the next few days, I listened more than I spoke, casually dropping questions into conversations, observing patterns, and noting what mattered to them. When my cousin mentioned the timing of their usual gatherings, I jotted it down in my mind, calculating the perfect window to announce our plan. I paid attention to subtle comments about favorite traditions, preferred foods, and who always claimed the best seats by the fireplace. Every glance, every sigh, every offhanded remark became data, pieces of a puzzle I was quietly assembling. "Oh, I didn't realize they loved the cranberry sauce so much," I thought to myself, smiling as I planned a small surprise twist. In conversations with distant relatives, I asked innocuous questions about past gatherings, noting schedules and patterns, always framing it as casual curiosity. I also listened for vulnerabilities: who was easily flustered, who liked attention, who prided themselves on being the arbiter of family etiquette. Each discovery added another layer to my plan, making it sharper, more precise. The thrill of being several steps ahead, silently weaving strategy from observation, gave me a quiet satisfaction. For the first time in years, I felt control over the narrative, a sense that we were no longer just passive participants in their favoritism, but architects of our own moment. Every scrap of intelligence gathered was a brushstroke in the portrait of our coming triumph, and I reveled in the cleverness it demanded. The week leading up to the holiday, my family fell into their predictable rhythm, confidently assuming we would quietly accept our usual exclusion. Their messages were casual, almost smug. "We'll see you later, though you know the kids might not fit in," or "Don't worry if you can't make it this year." I smiled politely, replying in neutral tones, but beneath the surface, I was already planting seeds of uncertainty. I dropped subtle hints in conversation, carefully chosen remarks that hinted at something different this year without giving anything away. "We might have some surprises this time," I said lightly, letting the words hang in the air long enough to be noticed. When a cousin asked if we'd be attending the usual gathering, I responded with a casual shrug and a knowing smile, the kind that left people questioning what they didn't know. Even small gestures, mentioning a friend who might drop by, referencing a minor change in plans, were calculated to make them wonder and stir the tiniest hint of anxiety. I watched carefully, noticing the shift in their expressions, the way eyebrows raised, the subtle tightening of smiles, the quick glance exchanged with another relative. That small ripple of uncertainty was exactly what I wanted. It was the first crack in their assumptions, a gentle nudge toward the disruption they would soon witness. I felt a thrill at how easily a few words and gestures could unsettle them, how power could be teased, hinted at, and then fully realized. Every smirk I caught, every hesitant pause in their conversation, only fueled my anticipation. The tension built quietly but relentlessly, and I knew that by the time the holiday arrived, the shock of our presence would land harder than they ever imagined, and my children would finally be in a space that celebrated them rather than silenced them. The morning of the holiday, I felt a knot of anticipation in my stomach, but I kept it hidden behind calm, measured movements. My kids were buzzing with excitement, unaware of the tension that had already built in my mind. When we arrived, the family greeted us with the usual mix of smirks and polite indifference, their confidence in their own control hanging in the air like a heavy curtain. They assumed, as always, that we were stepping into the background, ready to accept the tiny space they begrudgingly allotted. I smiled, nodded, and carried our gifts with an ease that disguised the storm of planning swirling inside me. Every handshake, every casual remark was deliberate. I let them believe we were passive, compliant, even small, while my mind cataloged their reactions, their expectations, their arrogance. My calm exterior contrasted sharply with the fire simmering beneath. I let them settle into their smug rhythm, knowing it would make the coming reveal even more potent. The kids laughed and played quietly, their innocence a stark contrast to the subtle tension between me and my relatives, and I felt a surge of pride that this year, the power dynamic would finally shift. Every glance exchanged between family members, every assumption they made, was a thread I was ready to pull. The room felt heavy with anticipation, though they didn't yet realize it, and I moved through it with the steady confidence of someone who knew exactly what was coming. The stage was set, and the moment of reckoning, both subtle and satisfying, was about to begin. Just as the family settled into their familiar rhythm, I made my move. I guided my kids toward the center of the hall, smiling warmly as if nothing unusual were happening, and then subtly signaled our guests. One by one, friends, neighbors, and colleagues began arriving, their laughter and chatter filling the space we had meticulously prepared. The private hall we had rented was transformed into a vibrant, welcoming environment. Tables adorned with thoughtful decorations, gifts and treats for the children, and a sense of warmth and celebration that my family had long dismissed as impossible. My kids' eyes sparkled with joy, their laughter ringing louder than the awkward murmurs coming from my relatives. The shock on their faces was instantaneous, the smug expressions faltering as they realized the space they had arrogantly assumed to be empty was now alive with attention, admiration, and celebration. Conversations paused, Forks hovered mid-air. Subtle glances were exchanged as the realization sank in. They had underestimated us. My heart swelled as I watched their discomfort grow, a quiet triumph settling over me. I had carefully balanced the reveal so that it wasn't just about space. It was about recognition, status, and the undeniable value of my children and our presence. The contrast between the exclusion they had enforced and the vibrant reality they were now confronted with was undeniable. Every cheer, every delighted comment from our guests, and every hug my kids received was a small victory, a public testament to the fact that we belonged, and more importantly, that we had never needed their permission. In that moment, I felt a rush of empowerment. The years of being underestimated, dismissed, and ignored had led to this perfectly orchestrated reversal. The tables had turned, and the room, once dominated by their confidence, now vibrated with the unmistakable energy of our triumph. For a brief moment, I could see the panic flicker across their faces as they realized their usual dominance was slipping. My cousin tried to regain control, suggesting we maybe tone things down, while another relative whispered, clearly hoping to manipulate the flow of attention back toward themselves. But I had anticipated this. With calm confidence, I navigated each interaction, subtly redirecting conversations, ensuring my children and our guests remained at the center. I complimented their achievements, engaged our friends in lively discussions, and laughed freely, showing no hint of insecurity. Every gesture, every word, reinforced that we were not just participants, we were in command of our space. The family's attempts at subtle interference were futile. The dynamic had shifted, and they could feel it. I watched as their smugness faltered, their forced smiles betraying disbelief, and realized the satisfaction wasn't just in the visual victory, it was in the emotional reckoning. Their assumptions had been shattered, their favoritism exposed as shallow and petty, and my children were thriving under the attention they had long been denied. Every glance they cast in our direction carried the weight of recognition, the unspoken understanding that exclusion had consequences. I felt an overwhelming surge of pride, not just for my strategic execution, but for standing firm, asserting our worth, and witnessing the tangible acknowledgement of it. By the end of the evening, the power balance had irrevocably shifted. Their attempts at control had backfired spectacularly, and the quiet triumph of finally being seen and respected washed over me with a satisfaction I had never known. The long years of silent endurance, the sacrifices, and the planning had all culminated in this exact, unassailable moment of vindication. As the evening wound down and our guests began to leave, I found a quiet moment to sit back and let it all sink in. The laughter of my children still echoed in the hall, mingling with the hum of conversations, and for the first time in years, I felt the weight of past humiliations lifting. I reflected on the countless holidays spent shrinking, bending, and silently enduring, and I realized how far we had come. The subtle power plays, the careful planning, the courage to assert ourselves. It had all led to this moment of undeniable triumph. I thought about my family's shocked expressions, the flicker of realization that their dismissiveness had only fueled our victory, and I allowed myself a private smile. This wasn't just about clever tactics or social maneuvering. It was about reclaiming dignity, protecting my children, and proving that consistent love, thoughtfulness, and patience could outshine arrogance and favoritism. I felt a profound sense of justice, not in a loud confrontation, but in the quiet, undeniable truth that we had created a space where we belonged, on our own terms. A warmth spread through me, a mix of pride and relief, as I recognized that enduring the past had strengthened me, rather than weakened me. Every slight we had suffered became a stepping stone, every moment of exclusion a reminder of why this reclamation mattered so deeply. My kids, beaming with happiness and confidence, were the ultimate validation. I knew we had not only won the day but had shifted the balance forever. And in that reflective silence, I understood something vital. Empowerment isn't given. It's claimed carefully, cleverly, and without apology. Just as I began to settle into the quiet satisfaction of our success, an unexpected ally appeared. Aunt Margaret, who had always overlooked my family, stepped forward with a warm smile and knelt to speak directly to my children, praising their creativity, manners, and thoughtfulness. She offered small gifts she had carefully chosen, her gestures sincere and deliberate, as if correcting the oversights of the past. The room shifted instantly. My relatives froze, exchanging glances of disbelief. Their smirks vanished, replaced by subtle panic and whispered complaints, as it became clear that even someone they had long ignored now recognized and celebrated my children. I watched, a quiet thrill surging through me, as their social dominance crumbled further under the weight of this validation. The humiliation was exquisite. Not only had I orchestrated our own triumph, but the family's inability to anticipate support from within their own ranks magnified the shock. My kids, radiant with pride, had allies I hadn't expected, and their joy only deepened the sting for those who had tried to exclude us. The unexpected sighting of Aunt Margaret was the final, satisfying twist, proof that exclusion and favoritism can backfire in ways even the most confident antagonist cannot predict. As the evening drew to a close, I gathered my children close and watched them bask in the joy and attention they had finally earned. Every laugh, every sparkle in their eyes, was a reminder that this holiday was ours in a way no previous year had been. We moved through the room with confidence, exchanging warm goodbyes with friends and extended family, feeling fully present and fully celebrated. The family who had once dismissed us lingered in the background, their previous dominance replaced by a subtle deference they could not ignore. I saw the quiet recalibration in their glances, the small adjustments in tone and posture, and knew that the dynamics had shifted permanently. Sitting at the table with my kids, sharing stories and basking in their excitement, I allowed myself a bittersweet reflection on the past. The years of exclusion, the sacrifices and the silent endurance had all led to this triumph. Love, fairness, and recognition were no longer abstract ideas, but tangible experiences, woven into the laughter and warmth that surrounded us. I felt empowered not through confrontation, but through clever planning, patience, and the unwavering commitment to give my children the place they deserved. That night, we didn't just celebrate a holiday. We celebrated victory, belonging, and the knowledge that our worth could never again be diminished by anyone else's assumptions. The satisfaction was profound, a quiet certainty that we had claimed our space, our dignity, and our joy, leaving behind a family who could no longer ignore what they had tried to suppress. As I tucked my children into bed that night, I let my mind wander over everything that had happened. The humiliation, the repeated exclusions, the small but persistent injustices. They had all been painful lessons, shaping my resolve and teaching me the value of patience and strategy. I realized that standing up to repeated unfairness didn't have to be loud or aggressive. It could be clever, calculated, and infused with grace. By asserting ourselves thoughtfully, we had reclaimed our dignity, transformed the holiday into a moment of joy and recognition, and subtly shifted the family dynamics in ways they could never undo. I understood finally that empowerment isn't granted by others. It's claimed through perseverance, creativity, and the courage to act when silence would only perpetuate harm. Watching my children fall asleep with smiles on their faces, I felt a profound sense of fulfillment. We had not only created a space where we belonged, but we had demonstrated that fairness, love, and thoughtful action could overcome neglect and favoritism. That night, I carried a quiet satisfaction. Injustice can be met with intelligence and heart, and doing so leaves a legacy far stronger than resentment ever could. Standing up, even subtly, had transformed our world, and the lesson was clear. When you refuse to be diminished, you don't just survive. You thrive, leaving lasting change in your wake.